Welcome to Pitch It To Me Podcast, a show about the subjective past, present, and potential future of Flesh and Blood design. Today's episode will be about the greatest villains in the history of Flesh and Blood. You can find us across all socials, such as Blue Sky and Instagram, at Pitch It To Me Podcast.
I'm Joel.
I'm Fuzzy.
And I'm Clark.
To lead off today's episode, I think it would be best to address the elephant in the room, which is what's going on with Pitch It To Me podcast. Because our releases have been delayed, they've been coming out on Wednesdays and Thursdays, or we're just missing weeks.
I think the better question would be, what isn't happening with the Pitch To Me podcast?
And that is, things are going right. Going right is not going for Pitch It To Me podcast. So along with Fuzzy's full-time schedule, you just got notice that your posting would be extended, correct?
Yeah, which is not something I'm complaining about. It's everything going right in the best way. It just means that I'm going to have extra stuff on my plate for another month longer than I was expecting. And the pay is really nice. Again, not complaining, but I was having this mindset that I would have more free time in April, and that's not the case. I'm going to have the same busy schedule going through April.
Yeah, the same full-time that we've been trying to manage and work around throughout the beginning of this year.
But you know what? I'm about to go on spring break. I have nothing going on this next week, so I'm going to use it to catch up, and then we're gonna be productive.
He's going to edit this episode.
Yeah, exactly.
On top of that, Joel, you've had a lot of travel happening recently.
Yeah, I just got back from this week-long convention in Las Vegas, and I fucking hate Las Vegas. I'm only there when I have to be, and it's an event that takes up a lot of my bandwidth, requires some travel. We're like planning 6 months ahead for it, and that's done and over with. I finished it, got back home. I'm home safe. I'm recording now, but I'm also leaving for Pro Tour Yokohama this weekend, so I get about 5 days in California before I got to leave again. So,
and then even taking an extended vacation after the PT. You're not just going for the PT. You're going because Joel needs a vacation.
Yeah, feeling really pent up with all the travel I've been doing, and also like. Just been doing a lot of stuff with the podcast and some extracurricular stuff to advance my career. And yeah, I just need a break. So I'm going to be staying in Japan for about 2 weeks.
Hope you enjoy yourself. Yeah, that sounds so fun.
Now, I know that it sounds like you guys have had a lot on your plate. So what's been going on with Clark? Clark, pick up the fucking slack, buddy. Well, after getting a semifinal finish at the AGE.
Congratulations.
Woo. I love that. Love that for me. My car broke down.
Oh.
Yeah.
Womp womp.
So the Volvo that smells like crayons is officially dead. And I have just been spending all of my time trying to sort out what that was. So that was me taking it to a mechanic, which meant having to get my parents to drive me out to Riverside so I can stand there and show my ID to the nice AAA tow truck driver so that he can tow it over there. And then they had to figure out what was wrong with my car, tell me that it was going to be a multi-$1,000 repair. And I said, well, that just means I'm going to scrap it. Then I had to figure out how to scrap a car. Mm-hmm. So it's just been a lot of that for this past week. And now I'm without transportation, which if you don't live in Southern California, you may not know this. If you don't have a car, you can't fucking go anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like hard to get lunch.
The only thing walkable is your apartment.
Yeah, the most immediate block that you exist in.
So you could visit like your friend Joel, your friend Josh, your friend Valerio.
Oh yeah.
If they don't have anything better to do.
I will say I have spent a lot more time just hanging out in our main room and being like a Pokemon encounter, like a trainer encounter. I just kind of stand there and someone walks into my field of vision and I'm like, Joel!
Wait, that's so funny.
And you need and like everyone realizes that they have to give me some. What's it called when you like?
He's a level 3
You like give the dog attention. It's like you just have to take care of them. Like there's an obligation to be like, well, they need some socialization. They need that. Yeah.
I don't know what term you're referring to, but I understand as you've explained it.
I know there's a specific term I'm looking for, but my roommates have been great.
Yeah, so be grateful this episode's even coming out with all the bullshit that's been coming our way.
I will say I'm grateful that I get to sit down with you two. I feel like we just don't get to hang out as friends as much anymore. And this podcast gives us not just an excuse, but like a dang good reason where we have to spend a little time together. Otherwise, like I wouldn't be able to see you guys. And I love y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with all this negativity, let's go ahead and talk about what this episode is about.
Oh, boy.
So one of the most interesting conversations that we got to have recently in our Discord and that I've been seeing online is why exactly are people upset at Omens of the Third Age? And there's a lot of reasons, lots of small reasons that have occurred in other sets. But one of the big ones is that it is a Runeblade Wizard Illusionist set. And these three classes have been a huge source of discussion and anger throughout the community and throughout our time in Flesh and Blood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we want to take an episode to just address that.
And while you're listening to the episode, why don't you ponder the question of the week? And we don't want to ask you, what's something that you like about either the Wizard, Illusionist, or Runeblade class?
And if you're already somebody invested in one of those three classes, we want to challenge you to pick a different class that you don't normally play all the time and tell us what you like about it, because what we're really focusing on here is getting everybody to say something positive about these three, specifically because this episode is in response to a lot of the negativity around those three.
Yeah, we know you don't like these classes. What do you like about these classes?
Exactly.
If you had to pick something.
I also want to issue a challenge. If you don't like the Wizard, Illusionist, or Runeblade class, say something nice anyway.
Yeah.
Step outside of yourself and find the positivity amidst all your negativity.
Yeah, the question isn't why do you like this class? It is what's one thing that you like about this class? There's a difference. So for our pitch structure today, for Red Pitch, I'm going to walk you through maybe the reason you don't like these classes is because they're winning lots of events. On Yellow Pitch, Clark is going to talk about how maybe the reason is they operate on a different axis than a lot of other strategies or heroes in the game. And on Blue Pitch, Joel is going to explain how these classes play a crucial part in gatekeeping certain strategies out of the meta and how they fit in with the larger metascape. So with that, I'm going to start things off on Red Pitch. I think the complaint at the forefront of everyone's minds when they say, I hate wizards, I hate illusionists, and or I hate Runeblades, is that they are strong classes that have always been winning games of Flesh and Blood and causing you, the audience, to lose games of Flesh and Blood. Does that sound accurate to you guys?
Oh, yeah.
People always hate whoever is at the top. And in the Flesh and Blood community, I'd like to put a little asterisk there. They hate the heroes and the classes and the decks that are winning games. But generally, I think we actually have high regard for the people that are constantly winning events. Luckily, like we are very... we put our hate on fictional characters rather than real people.
Yeah, you're weird if you do it otherwise. Like,
Yeah.
These are people too.
When I think of heroes like Aurora, Verdance, Dromai, Viserai, Icelander, Prism, that's like two examples from each of the three classes that are being printed in Omens of the Third Age. And I'm going to start it here. For this episode, we're going to talk about wizards, illusionists, and runeblades a lot. That's what the episode's about. So I'm going to acronymize, shorten it to WIRB. Wizards, Illusionists, and Runeblades, WIRB. So when I say WIRB, it means those three together as a group.
We're
So I gave you two examples just now for each of the WIRB classes where they were near the top of the meta and were annoying to play against. You would see them routinely when you go to your tournaments. And people tend to dislike those heroes at the top. But when you're hearing for bans to be called, it's the strongest heroes in the format that you want to get hit. You start to think, man, I just wish these heroes were less strong. The game doesn't feel like it's in the right spot. These need a hit. And LSS has even gone so far as to say that banning cards from these classes, the top strategies, is just routinely healthy for the game to provide shakeups.
Yeah.
So we almost need to have villains in the game that need to get taken down a peg in order for the game to feel like it's shifting in a healthy way.
Now, this isn't to say that these classes are the only classes that have produced heroes in this position.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of other heroes that have been there as well.
Yeah, like Lexi being the top of the meta for a really long time, Oldhim right there with her, Zen completely dominating the meta. He's a ninja. KO the brute.
He's the ninja. That's true.
Fuzzy just throwing that one in there. Like, yeah, let me shout out my class.
Should I go back, or are we just keeping that?
No. We're rolling through.
Okay. Syndra, another ninja. Victor, a guardian. Arachne, an assassin. These are all. Wait, is Arachne that strong? I guess it depends which Arachne, right?
I'd say Victor and Arachne right now, while they aren't the winningest heroes in the way that they are completely warping the entire meta around them, Victor and Arachne are certainly the two quote-unquote villains of the current meta.
And there's certainly been assassins like new that have sort of warped the meta around themselves as well. But while there are other examples of strong heroes, Werb don't have a monopoly on them, so to speak.
And that hate rarely translates to the entire class, right? When people hated Lexi, they weren't like, man, fuck all Rangers. They were like, fuck Lexi.
Voltaire, honestly.
Yeah. When it was Oldhim, it wasn't fuck all Guardians. Like, there wasn't a bunch of Bravo hate because Oldhim was doing really well. You know, these things have been fairly isolated to the heroes. It's really when the pattern starts to emerge of like, oh, wow, it's always a hero in this class. Whether that's right or wrong, that's when you really start to see the ideas expand and start being applied more widely.
And I think another way of framing that point that you just made, Clark, is that there haven't been very many weak versions of Wizards, Illusionists, or Runeblades. The closest thing we have is Vincent being a Runeblade that didn't have a lot of meta presence for a while. It took a while for people to not only, like, I think, figure out how to efficiently play her, as well as there's some essential support that was delivered in expansion slots over time. So on release, Vincent was much, much weaker than she is now. Although with some tools being given to her in Runeblade-centered sets and expansion slots, she's now a meta contender, especially in settling metas. She was sometimes considered like, wait, maybe Vincent is best deck in the format, although we haven't had a time where I think she was definitively best deck in format.
Right.
And looking at the other Dust to Dawn hero, Prism, the reprint of Prism, notoriously called New Prism, New Prism has also never really been meta warping, never been best deck. If anything, Prism has only really started reaching into those upper echelons the moment that the meta was prepared for her. All the brutes were really bad. Necromancer was around, which gave her easy on hits. When those situations weren't present, Prism always kind of fell to a B tier hero that a really good pilot could get a win on, rather than someone who was really like making a lot of pro players change over to her.
And Acilio, also similar trajectory to Vincent, generally considered pretty weak on release, but nowadays he is a meta contender. Like, you can expect to pair into one or two Acilio players over the course of a tournament because he's a definite threat that you have to be ready for. And I think one common through line here, Clark, I want to give you credit for this, for putting it in the notes, is that these are heroes where the better versions of those classes, quote unquote, have left the format, and these are what's left, right? Vincent is the only Runeblade, Acilio is the only Wizard, and Prism is the only Illusionist that is left in the format. Surprise, surprise, they're strong right now, considering that they're the only versions of this historically strong class. And I think that's part of what gives the impression of these classes being so strong is these are the weakest versions of those classes, guys, and they're still meta contenders. If you look at Guardian, like you were mentioning before, yes, Oldhim and Victor are really strong heroes. Betsy is not, you know. The original Bravo, rarely, there was some times where he was in the meta, but it's been a long time since that's happened, and the class itself doesn't have enough power to put either of those heroes on the top. If you took away the good Guardians, I don't think Betsy or even original Bravo would be a meta contender.
Agreed.
So when we see that there's a new Wizard, Illusionist, Runeblade being printed, we can kind of make the assumption that they're going to be strong because every other hero of any of those classes has always had some strength to it. But again, I think it's good to remember that on release, Vincent and Acilio were not considered that strong. So potentially the three heroes that we're getting in Omens of the Third Age will not be very strong on release and will need critical support to achieve a meta relevance.
One thing that I have always heard is that the moment that they print a talented hero, that talented hero is broken, right? The moment that you add a talent to a class, that's where it becomes OP. So yeah, sure, Bravo and Betsy, but they're untalented, right?
Sure.
Except right now, some of the worst performing Guardians are talented. Lyeth is reviled. You know, Tough Nut is revered. Adding a talent didn't suddenly make them the best version of that class. So I do want to note that just because there's a talent attached or just because there's a specific class attached, that doesn't necessarily mean, right? It is a good inferential tool, but be aware that there is evidence throughout history that we have examples of where the thing was done and it didn't result in that hero being OP.
And while I mentioned it earlier, where we only have a few examples left, I was looking at the floor. Now let's look a little bit about at the ceiling. All three of these classes, Wizard, Illusionist, Runeblade, have a higher rate of ascending to LL, where the strong versions of these heroes have in fact rotated out. And Clark, it looks here like there's a note that says, ask Clark about his data.
Clark's data corner, yes. So for those of you who have listened to previous episodes, you know that I like keeping track of living legend points, and specifically through a metric called points per week, where I track how many points a hero has earned for each of the week that they have been legal and available. And I look at the averages and I look at the medians as two different measures of center. And of the 19 LL'd heroes, Werb accounts for 11 of them, or 58% of all living legends belong to Wizard, Illusionist, or Runeblade.
That would mean that it's only 8 heroes outside of those 3 classes that have ever hit Living Legend?
Yes. So they have made up half of all of the best decks in format. Also, all 3 are at the top of my points per week metric for both the average and the median. So for both measures of center, accounting for outliers and not accounting for outliers, all 3 of these have been towards the top. I do want to make a note for Necromancer and Ninja, who are also very high performing classes for median specifically. They get pretty, it's back and forth between Wizard and Necro and Ninja for points per week. But yes, by these metrics of how quickly they are winning events and earning LL points, Werb is at the top.
And I mentioned Prism as the only non-rotated illusionist, but she's actually at 950 LL points at the time of recording. It could very easily be that with another event or two, like calling, or they don't have...
Nah, no more CC Battle Hardens. So it's just a calling.
And then she'd be out of the game, and there would be no illusionist in the format until Omens of the Third Age releases. And Joel's over here giving me them.
Rubbing my grubby little hands together.
Yeah, sneaky hands. With players concerned that these classes are notoriously strong, I think those concerns are valid. We talked about some of the numbers looking at it here. And I do want to take at least a little second to talk about why these classes are considered so strong. This is a bit of an open question to you two. I want to throw one theory at the wall to see if it sticks. You can tell me if you agree or disagree. But I think Wizards, Illusionists, and Runeblades have weaknesses. But for some of these classes, those weaknesses are hard to exploit, where other classes have defined weaknesses that don't take skill to exploit. As an example, when it comes to brutes, there's actually less that I can do sitting across from a brute in order to punish them for playing brute, to have strategies that directly counter them, but they're relying on random chance in order to make their strategies work. So it's not skill on my part that can cause a brute to fail, whereas when it comes to a wizard, I do have to make decisions in sideboarding and in gameplay to defend effectively that are kind of a high skill cap, and the weaknesses are there, but they take skill to express.
I think the reason why these classes perform really well so regularly is because the counterplay to these heroes are so far away from the fundamentals of Flesh and Blood.
Okay.
In every Flesh and Blood deck, there is a correct split of offensive versus defensive value in your turns. And I feel like Wizard, Runeblades, and Illusionist play on such a different axis that they don't really reward the same play patterns. Like Genesis, when you're learning the game, do you ever learn how to pop specifically Genesis or pop specifically a problematic aura Not really, because it's only with Illusionist or only with Prism in this particular instance. And so when these heroes are really prevalent, it makes sense that the pro players know how to deal with it. But on a larger scale, these heroes or these classes are going to dominate more often because the wider player base just is not as focused on targeting these playstyles as, you know, a pro player might be. Not to say that, you know, the average player is worse by any means, but it's just like you're exposed less to the top decks if you are not playing the top deck at a tier 4 event, you know.
Do you guys feel like these classes are genuinely pushed by LSS's designers? James White has allegedly gone on record saying that Illusionist is his favorite class. I mean, design-wise, there's a lot of cool things going on there, but as a cynical player base, sometimes we hear that and we think, oh, he's making Illusionist strong because he likes Illusionist and it's his game. And if I were making a game, I would want my favorite class to be strong. Like, he's not going to print his favorite class into the game unless it is competitively viable.
I feel like because James White has a Magic the Gathering background, he kind of wanted a de facto control archetype in his game. Because Magic the Gathering has always had Azorius control or Dimir control, Esper control, some level of deck with counter spells, end game threats, and card draw or cantrips. And in Flesh and Blood, you can't really do those things without being absurdly busted. We're seeing a lot less counter spells, disruption in the form of physical damage that can be blocked, and not really anything that just says your opponent can't do this thing. So the only other way to tax your opponent is through action points. And I feel like Illusionist has a very clear design principle rooted in there by taxing action points in a way that no other class has done. Like, Illusionist is the only one that can really do that to a great extent. So that makes sense why Illusionist would want this type of control deck in the game and will continue to keep printing powerful versions of this hero or of this class to always make sure that there's a de facto control deck in the format.
Interesting. Because I don't think I necessarily think of every single Illusionist as control, but going back, I would say all of them do kind of operate like control. They just don't operate as control in the way that James White has literally defined it in an article.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah. So I both agree and disagree in that Illusionist was definitely the control deck. Prism was definitely the control deck in the early days of Flesh and Blood, but I don't think that is actually like what Illusionists are in the wider world of Fab. But regardless, to speak to your original question, Fuzzy, I think anyone who cites that comment, which let's note is alleged, like I have yet to see someone who can actually provide a source for that comment.
Okay.
I think it was in those early days of Fab where like James White would just be talking to people. I think he has said that Prism was his favorite hero. And I think someone could have easily Mandela affected that to Illusionist is his favorite class. And I think it's pretty ridiculous that anyone actually uses that as evidence for anything.
Okay.
Because there are so many other people who work on the game and design the game. You think they don't want their class to be strong? Like, what is the assumption here, really, and if you actually look at the numbers on the cards, it's not like Illusionists are throwing cards that just have larger, what's the right word that I'm looking for here? It's not like they're printing 3 for 10 on hit, the opponent loses the game, you know? Like, and this is something that the designers have spoken to. It's really easy to make a weak or strong card. It's not hard at all.
Right.
You just up the numbers. You just literally power creep the game. And there isn't really power creep like that existing in Flesh and Blood. They set their metrics pretty early on about what their standard rates are, and they have held to it. Now, they've always been willing to warp that, like Phantasm. The attack is a 2 for 7, but it has Phantasm on it. Okay, is Phantasm worth the +1 power? I don't know, right? Maybe they don't know. Maybe the matchup thing is different, but it's rarely the fact that they're being like, well, we'll just make the numbers bigger for this class. And I don't think that is what they do. And yeah.
So I think I want to wrap up my pitch there. We've talked about the fact that these classes are winning when it comes to like looking at the Living Legend leaderboard and some boogeymen across Flesh and Blood's history. I think Yellow Pitch is going to give us a glimpse as to one potential reason why they tend to do so well, as Clark's going to talk us through the unique axes that these three heroes play on that other heroes are going to have to figure out.
Yeah. So for Yellow Pitch, I want to talk about the biggest selling point for Werb. Because let's be honest, these classes wouldn't be performing that well if people didn't like them. If they weren't fun, people wouldn't be playing them.
That's true. There's a lot of Illusionist stands out there that'll buy
Illusionist stands.
every Marvel copy of the class whenever they come out.
There's a reason these classes are up there, and I think part of it is their popularity. And I think the biggest selling point for these classes are also what make them so controversial.
The feet?
No. No, I think, though, it is interesting. No, I would say it is the fact that they operate on different axes than every other deck does. This is something that if you're really approaching from a game designer perspective, has to be in your game. Everyone can't be doing the exact same thing. I think this was something that I wrote down in an article in the very, very early days of the podcast, but I'm not sure if it ever made it onto the podcast. The only way that we get a truly balanced game of Flesh and Blood is if everyone is playing the exact same hero with the exact same deck list. That is the only way that you get a perfectly, truly balanced game of Flesh and Blood where only player skill and the randomization of the deck are the only factors that make a difference.
That sounds awful.
And it is awful. No one is going to want to really play that game a lot, very often.
Although people do play a lot of chess.
People do play a lot of chess.
Oh, hold on.
Though I will say, there are...
That's crazy.
Yeah, but how about we just cut that so I can let my point stand?
Sorry.
So it's really important that a game have different ways of doing the same thing so that everyone feels like they're doing it in their own special way. But then there is the issue of what if they do it in such a different way that the game systems don't allow you to interact with it in the same way. What Werb does is that they introduce brand new systems through their class mechanics that other classes don't really do. I guess maybe that one way that we could have said this is like warriors had attack reactions, but the thing is that they also printed generic attack reactions in Welcome to Wraith, right? Attack reactions are one of those base mechanics that belong to everybody.
And generic defense reactions as a natural way of fighting against them.
Yes. However, I would say that arcane damage is an example of a mechanic that is very unique to these specific classes and don't quite exist in the same generic way for everyone to be able to interact with. So let's talk a little bit about that. Wizards and Runeblades both have arcane damage, and we've talked about what the implications of that are. It means that everyone now needs to make sure that they have Arcane Barrier in their sideboard, both in the small amount to deal with Runeblades and in a larger amount to deal with Wizards, or maybe you just sacrifice the matchup entirely and you're just trying to race them, which LSS has been consistently nerfing by taking away the offensive overlap that decks can present. Plus, some decks just simply cannot deal that amount of damage. They are not designed to deal that amount of damage.
And can we talk about how Arcane Barrier doesn't actually protect you? It gives you the opportunity to protect yourself. So you can, at max, from your blues, get 3 points of value off of them, which feels like so low. Like if I throw in Sync Blow because my opponent's an assassin or a warrior, at least Sync Blow gives me 4 points of value and I can sync a card. Fate Foreseen give me 4 points and I opt. But Arcane Barrier removes my equipment to give me the opportunity to get 3 points of value for my cards. The math as a defender is low. And we see this in the offense, right? Like Wizards have their 2 for 5 Voltic Bolt. 2 for 5 is also low math. So we're playing like weirdly lower numbers against each other. It's such a weird system where like the numbers are completely different than a normal Flesh and Blood game.
Yes. Cards that deal arcane damage, solo arcane damage, are typically ranked as -1 value. And I think one of the things that makes Runeblades specifically more powerful is because they are dealing split damage, the arcane damage is allowed to be on rate per se, which is I'm attacking for 3 and dealing 1 arcane damage on my 0 cost attack, whereas normally it would be a 0 for 4. Yes, when I am blocking that, it's the same issue, right? I can block for 3 and then 1 damage is getting over. How do I deal with that? But now there are so few ways of dealing with that 1 damage efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that Runeblades actually get around leaking a lot more damage. Similarly with Wizards, yes, 2 for 5, I can just like if an opponent attacked me with a 2 for 5, I could block for 3, just in the same way I could pitch AB 3. But how do I deal with that other 2 damage? There are so many fewer ways of efficiently being able to do that against arcane damage than there is against physical damage. Now, how could LSS have designed arcane to be more in line with physical damage? Well, don't have arcane barrier. Just let that be a system of the game. Like, imagine if everyone just started the game with you can pitch to prevent arcane damage.
I still don't even think it would be that broken because, like, again, you're only getting 3 points of value for it. I think.
Well, your yellow would still only get 2.
Right.
But now you could go any limit, right? AB1, AB9, doesn't matter. Everyone can just pitch to prevent arcane damage.
And the whole thing would be closer to the fundamentals of the game. It would be less of a departure from normal FAD gameplay while still probably being really different.
Right.
And then you could add Spell Void to replace the blocking equipment. So it's like, yes, I have Spell Void 2 in my arm slot, just like I could have Temper 2, Battle Worn 2, Guardwell 2, right? I can still have blocking equipment, but now for a different axis. That would be far more in line with how normal physical damage works. But because we're reliant on Arcane Barrier, it makes it really, really different. Now let's talk about maybe Illusionists. Illusionists have always sort of had a mechanic that forces the opponent to interact with them. We talked about this in our episode with Kevin Murphy. So originally this was Phantasm and Spectra, but it can also just be allies or ward. Regardless, there's always sort of a keyword on Illusionist cards that force the opponent to do something extra to what they were already planning on doing. Some classes and heroes do that better than others. And the whole point there is that it's supposed to create like a, oh, well, here's my bad matchup. Very traditionally, you hear this with Brute, where Brute has Scabskin Leathers to make the extra action points to deal with Spectra, and a high density of 6 power attacks to deal with Phantasm, making them very, very good against Prism, or, you know, other Illusionist, Phantasm, Spectra-based heroes. But at the same time, many other classes don't have those tools and therefore struggle to generate the counterplay. We went over what a lot of this looks like in our episode on board states with Kevin Murphy.
Yeah, all of these ways that Illusionist cards force you to interact with them are also allegedly the way that they justify the higher rate cards that they have. Mm-hmm. You'll see Prism with 2 for 7 attack actions with Go Again, or cards with Ward that swung for above rate values with Enigma. Normally, they are balanced in those matchups where they do have a lot of ways to interact, like either through unpreventable damage or a high density of 6 power or higher cards. These strategies really get out of hand when there's a lack of those matchups. So this downside, quote unquote, is less prevalent or less obvious to people that maybe don't like these decks, or you're looking at a meta filled with Illusionists.
Yeah, returning to this, on the idea of like, how is Illusionist math decided? A lot of the time it is based on when the opponent has the immediate answer, but so many classes don't have the immediate answer. And a lot of the times that means that a meta can appear where the classes that are, or the heroes that are traditionally strong don't have those tools. And then the Illusionist can come in and snipe it really, really hard.
Yep.
Have a large amount of the field not have the tools to deal with them, and then they can perform very, very well and take big wins. I also want to sort of roll this into this idea of a lot of classes just don't have the tools. A lot of heroes don't have the tools, and that can lead to a bad feeling. It's like, oh, I can't even go deal with you if I don't have this specific tech piece or tool. That takes up more of my deck. I'm doing less of my core strategy. And that is a very negative feeling. Another negative feeling that a lot of these classes can present is the idea of the reversal. Fuzzy, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, if you've ever played against a Kano and you're like, I'm definitely winning this game. Like, first of all, that's a rare feeling, right? Because at any time, Kato can hit the Kato button and see like, well, maybe I can win right now. I don't know, probably not, but let's see. And then he does. And you're like, dude, I was at like 20 plus life above yours. I'm swinging at you for lethal. Like, you won the game anyway because you have this explosive value that can come out of nowhere. Some of these classes, especially Wizards and Illusionists, maybe Runeblade to a lesser extent, can pull off a win even if they were 20 life points below at one point in the game, which just goes to show you can't count normally against these heroes. We're talking about playing a different game than normal, operating on a different axis. If I can't measure victory by someone being 20 life points up, we talked about this in like the last episode that we recorded. Tempo is measured in part by your life point lead. And these classes just don't care about that as much because they're playing something else, whether it's explosive multiplicative combo value or assembling a board state that I can rely on to get value, even if my life points are low.
Yeah, the ability to cash in that board state is really present here in the idea of the reversal, right? Whether that's, going as far as like some Sigil Brilliances or like Sigil Lightnings that are on the field for a Acilio, whether that is the healing pots for Verdance, whether that's a rune chant stack for someone like Florian or Vinset. Regardless of what it is, the ability to carry over value for a spike turn to create this reversal of fortunes and reversal in tempo, it can create some very negative feelings, especially for people who are not prepared or experienced against it.
Yeah, it can be very annoying to feel like you're winning because in a normal game of Flesh and Blood, you would be, and you're playing a normal hero. And then these heroes pull the rug out from under you and suddenly you've lost the whole game and you're not making it to top 8. It could easily leave someone bitter. There are some other examples in the game where this reversal occurs. I would argue fatigue decks are making it their primary game plan because they just don't care about life total. They care about deck damage. And then Teklovosen especially has one card, Singularity, that really like hits a reversal where he's just trying to get to a strong Singularity and he can probably run away with the game from there, especially if he's whittling down your number of cards in the deck up to it.
I don't think I've ever beaten a Teklovosen after they've resolved Singularity.
Mm-hmm. It is doable. Maybe it was more doable back in the day than it is nowadays, but...
Oh, definitely doable, but
Yeah.
I feel like the people that do spend time on Teklovosen know how to take advantage of that game state and just run away with it.
A lot of the times they even math it out so that when they Singularity, they're like, now I have the game.
Exactly, yeah.
They just don't go for it early,
Right.
Regardless, I'm so happy that you bring up these examples, Fuzzy, because I want to end this pitch by talking about how other classes are actually just like this too. They're just maybe a little bit worse at it.
You're talking about playing on a completely different axis than a normal game of Flesh and Blood.
Yes. So one of those things I want to talk about is Guardian. Guardian is not traditionally a very broken class. Yes, they've had Starvo. Yes, they've had Oldhim. But very rarely are they like best deck in format taking over everything because they're doing the Guardian things.
What about Victor, Clark? What about the hero you play?
Well, let's talk about Victor. In my semifinals, I first had to beat Tao Tao in quarterfinals on Arachne Huntsman. Tao Tao is a very, very skilled player. Someone who puts in a lot of reps against these decks.
And this is for context in like a local 1K that we were in, right?
Yes, but also I would say Tao Tao is a nationally to internationally recognized player.
It's still Tao Tao Chu.
For his skill, yes. Specifically on Assassin, he came in with more cards in deck than I did and had 3 remembrances instead of to my 1 remembrance. And he still lost on fatigue. And that is because Guardian operates in a way differently than every other class, which is that I can pitch for bigger attacks. I can consistently turn my 1 blue in hand into a wounding blow with Titan's Fist. That's crazy. That's like an explicitly powerful thing. I am turning my blue into a red.
Absolutely.
We've talked about how powerful that is, and Guardian Hammers just do that, period mark. That's pretty powerful. The ability to pitch 6 or 9 resources to throw an attack for 14 at the opponent. I go up so much on fatigue by taking these plays and by doing these plays regularly. But how often is that the thing that actually matters and wins games? Way less often. I bring up the Tao Tao game because it was the first game I ever played where I really felt the power of pitching to my attacks and to win in fatigue. And I have been playing Victor for nearly 2 years now.
Yeah.
It is telling that that was my first game where I finally felt it. Because it is such a rare game state, it is rarely a power that leads to winning games. Let's look at another one, Mechanologist with items. Lots of classes can't deal with items. They can't deal with or like interacting with the top of the opponent's deck.
I would even argue for classes like Brute that can easily interact with items, they still have to make the decision in deck building to put those cards in the deck at all.
Yeah, I mean, how many classes actually have an item that makes running those cards relevant? Great point, Fuzzy.
Like, how often are you going through your deck list and you're like, I guess I do have tools to destroy items. I didn't do that on purpose. Like, that's not a thing that exists in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, and now we have Dash.io being one of the best decks in format because she can stack 2 Cerebellum processors and a Declo Core on the battlefield, gain 4 action points in a turn with 3 extra resources and 4 extra action points. You know, like,
I could literally feel myself glazing over and just saying, like, you do the math. That's not my job.
Yeah. These are extremely powerful, unique axes that mech operates on that no other class can operate on, that people don't really have the tools to deal with. But how good is that at winning the game? You know, with items, you're putting a lot of non-blocks in. There's this very clear and obvious downside that can really hurt you. A lot of the times you have to play them for no value or for your entire action point, and that can be pretty harmful to your deck. And the higher skill expression means that there's more opportunities for misplays. And I've definitely won games by 1 or 2 points because the opponent misplayed. Again, with going against Mechanologists. Then let's talk about Riptide and Syndra with their unblockable damage. While Syndra has taken a lot of the note, and we saw how good it was at winning games in 2025, let's not forget that Riptide also has the ability to deal immediate, direct, and unstoppable damage. Oh, are you trying to play a deck that has Go again? Guess what? Riptide's going to deal 6 extra damage to you throughout the course of a game. That's crazy. That is an explicitly very powerful thing to do. But does it win games in the same way that arcane damage win games? In the same way that a board state can win games?
Yeah, Riptide's not considered a meta-dominating threat most of the time. There might be some times where you can see some Riptides at the top tables, but it's not a plan that you need to sideboard. You need to have a game plan against because he's not a specific threat.
I would also say that this specific one, you are far more likely to find that you have a tool that already deals with it. Shelter from the Storm was a great one that they printed recently, but Sigil of Solace. Lots of decks run incidental life gain, which actually help offset this unblockable damage.
I frame it a little bit differently. Like, I think it's actually hard to find a lot of incidental life gain. LSS has made the decision they don't want to have a ton of cards gaining you life here and there. Like, it definitely exists, and it's much easier to find than these other examples. So I definitely agree, Clark. But it's also not like you're going to look at your deck and being like, oh, I guess I do have life gain in my deck already. That's just naturally there that I don't have to go out of my way to find.
Yeah. To throw another example, Warriors and always being able to pitch to weapon as an anti-fatigue tool, very similar to Guardian with their hammers. I think Warriors are always just kind of up in fatigue math against a lot of other decks. But then they have this downside of having to rely a lot on non-attack action cards and reaction cards, which are rated at lesser value, which can sometimes balance that out. And again, how often are you really going to the fatigue state where pitching to weapon and not losing those cards in deck really, really matters? Finally, the last thing I want to talk about here is the next hero that I think could become our big bad. The hero that everyone's like, God damn it, I hate seeing this hero at my locals. I hate seeing this hero at my tournaments. And that's Tekla Vossen.
Yeah.
Fuzzy, you already mentioned the reversal element. But there's also the fact that Teklo has a board state through his equipment value. And that's just getting easier to play and easier to pull off as the days go by. The Teklo players are getting better and better at it. Shout out to Evan Bridges, a local of ours, who made top 8 on Teklo at the Calling Memphis recently, as well as our local and friend Ben Friedman, who's been doing very, very well with Teklo at locals recently, including a top 4 finish at our local PQ.
Yeah.
But I really think Teklo could be the next big bad, because who can destroy equipment right now? Guardian. It's just Guardian.
And Mech.
Mech a little bit. Mech a little bit. But it's pretty rough. And
Rangers with drill shot.
oh, that's just a -1 counter. That's not destroy, Fuzzy. But I want to mention the reason why I'm specifically focusing on Teklovasan here is because Teklovasan, for the longest time, was a joke hero at the bottom of the leaderboards, was not winning events, was not getting LL points. But that's not to say that the design elements that make his design problematic in a similar way that Werb has been problematic, they've always been there. It's just a matter of how good was it? How good was it at winning games? How well supported was it? Was the math there? I think what you'll find is if you remove yourself from that blind red fury that you can sometimes focus towards these 3 classes, you'll find that lots of other classes actually do similar things, just maybe not as well or as often as Werb does. So context. Context is helpful. Always helps you create a more balanced and meaningful worldview.
I like that point, Clark. Although it's one thing to say, hey, those things that you hate, shouldn't you also hate these guys too for the same reason? What if we had a reason for why Wizards, Illusionists, and Runeblades are actually very helpful and healthy for the game instead of just representing the same potentially unhealthy patterns in other heroes and classes? Joel, you're talking about something like that in Blue Pitch, right?
Yeah, that does sound a little familiar. Now that I think about it, I'm talking about the Gatekeepers of Flesh and Blood in the Blue Pitch. And I wanted to talk about this because obviously we've been addressing how Werb, right?
Yeah, Wizards, Illusionists, and Runeblades.
Yeah, because we're addressing why Werb consistently shows up at the top. And we don't really talk about like what happens when they eventually leave the format, because we've had it once before during the heavy hitters meta when it was largely Brute Warrior and Guardians taking prevalence in the meta.
And
ninjas, true. I know this gets people asking, like, why does LSS keep showing these classes such blatant favoritism? And I don't think it's actually favoritism. I think it's a matter of keeping the ecosystem in check. And we can measure this in a few different ways when Werb is present in the meta. Runeblades and Illusionists keep the slow decks in check, either through rune chant stacking or your board state of allies and ward. These are what taxes your opponent for not being proactive enough in the game and punishes you for limiting how much action points you have to be offensive in favor of more defensive capabilities. Because do you think we would be talking about Teklovasan or Arachne Huntsman in great efficiency if these decks were not prevalent right now? This is the sort of ecosystem that you can look at when there isn't a wall of 40 rune chants or a bunch of dragons running around or, a huge board of ward stopping you from landing your detrimental on hits.
Sure.
Runeblades also keep other board state decks in check. We talked about how annoying it is to deal with this different axes of playing the game through split damage being, physical and arcane damage. And that's a really good way of dealing with illusionists that rely on wards as their pseudo attack actions, or allies that necromancer or illusionist decks rely on to declare attacks with. If you're able to send damage to clear the board state or allies while also attacking the hero, that's the best way to deal with these board state decks.
And Runeblades have always had that ability with rune chants. When I attack a Spectra or an ally as a Runeblade and I have rune chants down, the rune chants still go at the hero.
Absolutely.
I am still putting some pressure on them even while dealing with that thing that is supposed to pull me away.
That was always so whack. Rune chants were weird like that. Because if you attack a Spectra Ore with like Rosetta Thorn, which deals arcane damage when you attack, a lot like how a rune chant does, but it doesn't work for Rosetta Thorn, but it works for the rune chants.
However, if I was attacking an ally,
Oh, yeah.
I could make the 2 arcane from the Rosetta Thorn go at the Dromai,
Hell yeah.
and my little 2 physical go deal with their little dragon.
Yeah, and that was such a strong part about the Runeblade design because, like, yeah, you can put fucking 14 copies of ALS on the field, but I have 30 rune chants I'm going to send at your face, and you're at 10, dude. Good luck with that.
And you know, I think that's a great example of how the rules can also change how we engage with this.
Absolutely.
Recently, I think Victor has also stepped up in the meta because I am now allowed to clash against ally attacks.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
It's made a big difference. Little rule changes like that of how things interact can make a difference with how these strategies, how much they actually gatekeep other decks.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously wizards have a very unique role as well. I'm of the opinion that wizard keeps aggro decks in check because aggro decks often forego any large amounts of arcane barrier or anything like that to prevent the damage. They'd rather just race down the wizard. And against heroes like Kano, it worked. You can race down Kano before they kill you because they just don't have enough potions. But against Icelander, Verdance, and Acilio, you might not always have that time.
That's definitely my lived experience as somebody who'd played a lot of Katsu, especially.
Yeah.
I was always losing to Kano because what do I want to do as an aggro player? I'm going to take damage in order to keep all of my cards in hand, and then I'm going to try to send them face. Katsu especially requires a little bit of setup because Bonds doesn't do anything unless I've already played or blocked with combo cards.
Right.
And it's extra hard to get those in the graveyard against a Kano. And I don't want to have extra resources lying around. I want to be super efficient with my cards. I don't really want to pitch to the Frostbites.
Right.
So it definitely could feel really tricky as an aggro player.
Now, here, I think I disagree with you a little bit, Joel, because for me, wizards have always gatekept the slower decks by being combo decks and having these really large, reliable combos built into their systems. When you go to the Fab TCG and you look at the different heroes, every single wizard is listed as a combo hero. LSS very clearly sees them as a combo deck meant to deal with slower decks, I think, rather than maybe a race, especially because, I mean, how often has the answer to Kano and other wizards be just kill them forehead? Don't give them the time or the space to cast their arcane spells.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because I do recognize that wizards have a lot of combo tools to deal with these slower decks. However, in the last few months, I would say they've been pretty aggressively banning the combo tools from wizard. I'm thinking namely in terms of like back in the day, Icelander lost Amulet of Ice, which is what they use to get rid of your opponent's entire hand and shoot them for a lot of arcane damage. Plume of Evergrowth was banned to stop you from replaying Rampant Growths in the same turn, so you're limited to your 3 copies that you have in your deck.
Acilio's combo's kind of gone untouched so far.
Yeah, they did preemptively say they're banning Volzar, but that is also with the introduction of a new Acilio. So what they're trying to accomplish with that ban is still up for grabs, so I'm giving myself a half point there.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the Volzar ban is telling because when Volzar amps by like 8 or 9 on the big combo turn.
there's a spell in that set that they do not want to be amped by 9.
What is Storm doing in my goddamn Flesh and Blood deck?
I will say, guys, it feels very on brand for Wizards for you two to be arguing about when are they supposed to lose and not being able to come to a consensus.
Yeah.
You can imagine Kano sitting right in the middle with that smirk, like, I don't actually ever lose.
And yet you never win. Curious.
So while we're talking about these bans, I think that is largely because LSS wants Wizard to have these tools to get over that defensive hump that these decks can present, because it's not fun when you literally can't take a game action that deals any damage, so you need some way to get multiplicative value and get over these defensive decks. But I still hold that that is not the like core identity of Wizard. I think Bolander or Icelander and Verdance most exemplified this example because they both have really good 2-card hands and disruption to pair with that to deal with aggro decks. So why are we talking about these classes if we're supposed to be talking about the classes of the Gatekeep? And that's kind of the crux of the issue, is that whenever Werb is present in the meta, it really feels like that they are the only decks that can participate. They create their own meta triangle, so to speak.
Yeah, because they have the tools to deal with each other, and because they are also demanding the other to play on their own unique axis, these three classes seem to do a really good job of being able to deal with each other. So when one of them rises in priority, the other ones tend to rise in priority as well.
Right.
I would very much like to note that I think this is one of the reasons why all three of them are coming out in the same set of Omens of the Third Age, because it's really hard to design a balanced, limited environment without including others.
Yeah, if Omens of the Third Age included Brute or Warrior in some aspect, that would feel really weird because Warrior or Brute would have to be extremely juiced to be able to magically be able to deal with arcane damage in a significant way, or they would just be as bad as they are historically into arcane, and that just doesn't make sense. So printing all three of them in one set means that they can be powerful, synergistic, without making it a worse limited environment, and they don't have to compensate for any like weird triangle or horseshoe. We brushed on it a little bit, but I want to talk about what happens when multiple heroes within the Werb classes leave the format, when we go into another quote-unquote golden age of Fab.
Which is really just to say an open meta, right?
More or less, yeah. And it occurs for a few reasons. Number one, the rise of fatigue decks that don't have to clear ward, auras, or allies in a majority of their matchups. We're seeing this now with Arachne Huntsman and kind of Teklo-Vossen, although I don't think I would categorize him or Victor as a fatigue deck. But they need a lot of time to set up these fatigue end states without literally going to time. So they need to find lots of really good banishes with Hunter Hunted or their contract cards. And they can't be doing that when you have to send your attacks into allies or land hits with multiple attack reactions against a field of ward.
Yeah, sort of damage check, right? Wizards
Exactly,
and Illusionists oftentimes present just damage check for the opponents, and many decks struggle to even deal 12 damage in a turn. The moment that you're demanding that they regularly deal more than 12 damage every single turn, yeah, those decks are going to perform worse.
Next, probably the most frustrating part of Flesh and Blood for me is when mid-range decks have to constantly flex between being the aggressor or the control deck when Werb classes are present in the meta. And so when they eventually leave, it reduces the arcane barrier requirements or reduces the amount of aggressive cards that I need to run in a mid-range deck, and just allows me to take advantage of presenting the most or best numbers possible every single turn cycle.
Yeah, if you think about what I was saying with arcane damage and how you literally can't cover it efficiently in the same ways, that there are less available efficient ways of covering their breakpoints, it means that you're constantly leaking damage in a way that mid-range decks almost are always trying to avoid doing.
Right, exactly. And lastly, the remaining problem classes that are left behind when these dominant Werb decks rotate are usually too weak to take advantage of the void left by these strong heroes. We mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to say it again for posterity. Vinsat, being the last Runeblade standing, is just not strong enough to be as aggressive as the previous Runeblades or as defensive as Florian could be. She is still she's still plagued by Runeblade hands and also just uber defensive decks that have disruption to mess with her game plan. Prism is also notably a lot weaker, starting at a much lower life total. Sure, she can theoretically gain life, quote unquote, by flipping over her angels, but that still doesn't mean she has more health to deal with. If you have enough tools to deal with the ward, you can usually still just aggro her out and make the virtual life that she can gain pretty much useless.
It's a lot harder to flex into like a full Spectra Aura game plan in the way that old Prism used to against her bad matchups.
Absolutely. Also, them banning Tome of Divinity significantly reduced her power in terms of using the ALS loop to lock out the game for slower decks, and also a way to get ahead on the aggressive matchups.
And you know that Tome of Divinity high roll element that you just mentioned? I love that because you also have here in your notes about Garvey Bones.
Yes.
Yeah, so Garvey Bones also just had Chart the High Seas taken away from him.
Absolutely.
Which was kind of his Tome of Divinity, which let him like play a card to essentially draw a free card and get the blue pitch to play it and like do all the things that he needs to do That's kind of what Tome of Divinity was kind of doing in Prism, of being like, let me just refill my hand here so I can find that ALS.
Absolutely. And in general, I think LSS really wants to avoid cards that just let you draw more cards or create more value than it is intended per card. Tome of Divinity being one of them, Chart the High Seas being an egregious example of that as well. Now, while the golden age of Fab is often considered as an enlightened time of Flesh and Blood, even as a brute and warrior enjoyer, I can confidently say that it doesn't always result in the best ecosystem. I think we as players enjoy the game more when you can perform well in a meta with the tools you are given, rather than performing well because no one is strong enough to stop you. I know at times it can seem like LSS, especially with the release of Omens of the Third Age, continually choose to buff and include these Werb classes in their resurgence of power, but I personally choose to believe that over time we'll find a way for these decks to exist without dominating the meta. And with that, I want to move on to the Arsenal Zone.
Snaps. That was great, Joel.
This is the Arsenal Zone. It's a part of our podcast where we talk about a card we like, a card we hate, a card we like to hate, or a card. We start off every Arsenal Zone by shouting out one of our patrons. If you subscribe to our Patreon at $5 or higher, you can get access to a special Discord channel where you can leave a card suggestion and why you like the card. We're also accepting audio submissions and have finally enabled that in our Discord so that people can leave them.
Yerp.
So, for today's episode, Joel, who have we selected?
We have Xaliver this week with Lobotomy.
Xaliver got a lobotomy?
No.
Oh, no. Lobotomy mentioned Xaliver? No, Xaliver mentioned Lobotomy.
Oh, like the Flesh and Blood card.
Yeah, the Flesh and Blood card, exactly.
Yes.
Lobotomy is a 0-cost assassin attack action card with stealth. It's a majestic from Compendium of Wraith, and it says, when this attacks, you may equip an Orbitoclast from your inventory. And when this hits a hero, if you control an Orbitoclast, they lose all hero card abilities during their next action phase. Blocks for 3, and it is red. Pitches for 1.
Xaliver had this to say about the card. Bonus suggestion, Lobotomy! Never knew someone to be so excited about it. It's a new card and pin that specifically rewards running a previously ignored card, Orbitoclast, and has an interesting dynamic with flick knives. It gives you a new dagger to flick, but if you flick it on this chain link, you miss the on hit. You can take up the mantle into this, but then you need to already have or equip an Orbitoclast with Retrieve or Concealed Blade. It's a tricky, high-value card with an impactful, but not game-winning on hit, and is my personal favorite art in Compendium of Wraith. Xaliver says, I'm a sucker for the creepy and weird with the vibrant color palettes. Chaos, stay winning.
This art goes hard.
This art is sick as fuck. And I love how it presents the looming presence of the Dr. Mortimer in Arachne's life.
Yeah, he looks fucking terrifying in this art. That is for sure.
And like the brains going around the sides with the needle poking through the wall. Like, it's creepy looking.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is some fantastic visual storytelling that gives us a much deeper insight into who Arachne is as an individual.
Notably, it's a smaller quest for turning off hero abilities, but less permanent than something like Dishonor, which is kind of interesting.
And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love cards that mention other Flesh and Blood cards by name. It's one of my favorite mechanics. You got to run an Orbitoclast for this card.
Oh, that's true. Amnesia gets really good. Or Amnesia gets better with this card.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. I also want to acknowledge just how much I love seeing the Humble on hit appear on another card, because Humble is one of those on hits that I really, really like, but it blocks 2 and it's a rare, so I never want to put it in any of my decks. So it's nice that there is a potentially good card that has the on hit.
Fantastic shout. Could I talk about my card?
Fuzzy, please do so.
What if I told you there was a card from High Seas that when it attacks, you can discard a yellow card, and if you do, you draw a card and create a gold token? Do you think that would be like playable in
I think
High
it would be
Seas?
so playable, it would be banned.
You would think so, but my card today is called Swindler's Grift. Have you ever even heard of this card?
Yes, I have heard of this card.
Oh, I guess I have, because I've unfortunately played High Sea Limited.
It's a common that costs 2, blocks for 2, attacks for 6 at red, 5 at yellow, 4 at blue. And like I said, when it attacks, you discard a yellow. If you do, draw a card and create a gold token. And it is a pirate attack action card. Notably, does not have Go Again. And I think that's part of the reason why this card doesn't see any competitive play, even after they banned red and yellow, gold and tipple. Because even though it's a 2 for 6, kind of on rate, that gives you a gold token just for cycling a card. You could discard an ally to draw a card. There's a lot going for this card, right? But the fact that it doesn't have Go Again, what are you going to do with it?
Also blocks 2. Ooh, gross.
Very
grody
true.
patootie.
You lost me a block 2 and also cost 2.
That's true.
That's pretty bad.
But we have lots of yellows and blues in Gravy Bones, and I want ways to make gold and just put my allies in the grave.
Yeah.
It's a little weird that you draw a card, but this doesn't have Go Again. So you have to stick that thing in Arsenal, and I don't like arsenaling any of my allies in Gravy Bones.
Yeah, it's a 3-card play that's actually a 2-card play, and those sorts of plays are usually bad.
Unless you draw into Pummel.
Or it's turn 1.
Yeah.
Oh, drawing into Pummel's kind of cool.
With dead threats? Because you put an ally into graveyard
Oh,
so
yeah.
you can generate a resource. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
I don't want to alarm anyone, but I think we may be cooking on this card.
This card could probably be played in Silver Age. Why not? You can play Pummel in Silver Age.
No, I'd rather run Rainbow Tipple.
But in addition to. So I brought a copy to sign for each of you. Here you go.
Thank you, Fuzzy.
It's got my signature and everything.
Aw. That's such a novel idea.
Speaking of novel ideas, what if we heard the card that Clark wanted to shout out today?
Oh.
Sure. Though I would say that my card is not very novel. In fact, it is probably the least novel card because the card I'm talking about today is Remembrance, which is really just a card all about playing other cards.
That's true. You're not cycling anything into your deck that you haven't seen before that game.
Yeah. Remembrance is a rare. I thought this was a majestic, but it's just a rare. Yellow instant. It's a generic instant. Costs 0. And it says take 3 action cards in your graveyard, shuffle them back into your deck, and then banish Remembrance.
It's a super rare.
It's a super rare?
Yeah.
Hey, still a rare. Clark isn't wrong. I'm talking about Remembrance specifically because of how important it's become to Victor in the current meta, and I think that's really cool. But also, there was a really great article written by Howling Minds for TCG Player where they talked about Remembrance and whether or not Remembrance should be banned. They made the argument for the health of the game, it should be banned. And I typically agree. For decks that are getting caught into fatigue scenarios, Remembrance also often becomes a race of who can run the most Remembrances. I think that's a really toxic play pattern. I think it's also just a card that rewards you for shuffling in like 3 random cards. I really like it as a one-of in Victor of being like, I'm going to get my visits back, and then if you can interrupt me in some way, I need to know what other cards are good for me to get back. But the moment that it's run as more than a one-of, I think it's problematic. In the article, Howling Mind shouted out a potential custom card version of it where it would be legendary. And I think that's a really cool answer to the Remembrance problem. But also, I don't know if Remembrance needs to be banned right now because fatigue is just so rarely a game state that we actually end up in Flesh and Blood that so far it hasn't actually caused a logistical problem, though perhaps now we are entering that moment.
Yeah, I would argue that we're already there because of how many decks that don't normally run this card need to run this card. I feel like every deck that I've been trying to figure out for Pro Tour Yokohama has had some number of copies with Remembrance because of the likes of Arachne, the likes of Victor. I don't know. I think it should be banned.
I think it makes sense that it's on people's radar because it's something that kind of lets you break the rules of the game. You know, I'm only allowed 3 copies of every card that I bring in. And that's a good balancing tool for especially these high power Majestics. But to be able to like cycle those 3 back in, perhaps multiple times, and just play them over and over again over the course of the game, 12 copies of Visit the Goldmane Estate does sound like a very extreme number of Visit the Goldmane Estates.
Yes. Yes, it does.
But I don't think it's quite at a broken level right now, personally, but I empathize with everyone who argues that it is.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I think it would be a good ban to visit the moment that our Worm decks come back in Omens of the Third Age. That way it can be banned without feeling like they're just trying to attack the decks that are finally doing well.
I can see that. Well, I'll go next. As everyone here knows, I'm doing an Arsenal Zone card for each class in the game. But I got stumped here because in the February filters page, it goes Adjudicator, Assassin, Bard, and Brute, which I've been following. And this is generic. And I asked my co-host, is generic a class?
Yeah.
And they said no. But
No, I said yes.
did you?
Yeah.
I think Clark said was, I don't know, Joel, are you really at generic? He questioned Joel's alphabetizing skills.
True.
Yeah, I'm looking at a screen. But it is the next filter in the list, so I'm going to do a generic card for today. And the card I picked was Command and Conquer.
Holy.
Command and Conquer, if you don't know, is a 2 for 6, 3-block majestic attack action, red pitch that says...
When it hits you.
That says, defense reactions can't be played this chain link. And when this hits a hero, destroy all cards in their arsenal, even if they have 2. And I picked this card because I've been prioritizing it more often in my lists because of Hunter or Hunted, another card that has been seeing a lot of play recently. And I love pummeling this card. It's just so fucking broken.
CNC Pummel, Guardian Play, my beloved.
Yeah, it's a generic. They're both generic.
And yet, it's Guardian coded as fuck.
Yeah. Anyways, I like playing it in Brute, specifically RKO, as a really solid 3-card play. And it's just, I like that we have access to this card because whenever defense reactions get a little out of hand, you can always say, hey, block 10, idiot. So yeah, that's my card today, short and sweet.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love how you implied that there are people out there who haven't heard of this card. What Flesh and Blood are you playing? It's just Silver Age, right? They're like mono Silver Age.
Yeah, what
players.
if they're mono Silver Age or mono limited post Welcome to Wraith? Wait, no, Arcane Rising.
Yeah, Arcane Rising, I will say. You know, this card was also interesting because it teased Volcor.
Did it?
Yeah, because when it came out, we didn't have any heroes from Volcor yet.
And now it's teasing Monarch 4 or 3, whatever's next.
Set 20.
Maybe that Spook Demon is there fighting the Omen of the Third Ages hero.
No, don't say that.
I don't know. I think the Big Giant Eclipse is telling us it's going to be Monarch Part 3.
Yeah, surely.
Oh, that does look like Solana in there. Yeah, you're right.
All right. That is the end of our Arsenal Zone and therefore the end of our episode.
And it's hot as hell in here, so we're going to keep the outro short.
Yeah, it's... Hey, Discord, spoilers, only place, right?
Yes! Yes, it is, Clark!
Yeah, sure. Patreon at $10. I put an article up every single month. At $5, you can suggest cards to go here. And yeah, that's it. That's all we got.
Thanks for listening.
Until next one, guys. Bye.
And what's your favorite thing about an illusionist, a wizard, or a runeblade? Especially if you are a notorious hater of one of those classes. All right, that's it. Thank you,
Say
everyone.
something nice, you negative Nellies.
Bye. Pitch It To Me podcast is hosted by Fuzzy Delp, Clark Moore, and Joel Recinos. Executive producer, Talon Stradley. Logistics coordinator, John Farkas. Music by Dillon Hulse. Logo by Han V. Sound mixing, Christopher Moore. And last but not least, you. Thank you for listening. Please give us a follow on your favorite social media platform at Pitch It To Me Podcast. Which, I'm going to start it. We're going to be talking about wizards, illusionists, and runeblades a lot. I'm going to call them WIB. Because we're going to say it a lot in this episode. WIB means wizards, illusionists. Oh, word.
I was like, B for blade? Okay, Fuzzy.
Or how about
Work in progress?
Werb. Wizards, illusionists, and runeblades. Werb.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to start over.